let us discuss John Carter in Space. This is a very interesting film to describe because it's getting pretty panned by the critics. Rotten Tomatoes, I think it was something like 46% or something like that, so it's not doing very well. And I can see why. Technically it's not a good movie, but there's an audience out there for this kind of film. It's a kind of film that's very... If you're just looking for something creative and just sort of simple action, but still a lot of creativity, this is sort of that film. But I can't act like there's not a lot of problems with it, or a lot of things that don't make sense, or at times it's too complicated, at times it's too simple. The best way I can describe it is if you like films like Stargate or Tron Legacy, films that are pretty preposterous, are pretty stupid, but they're kind of creative and they're kind of just fun, dumb action, even though it doesn't always add up. It's that kind of film. Now, with that said, if you can't stand those movies and you're constantly pointing out the problems with the plot, the problems with this kind of story you've seen a million times and stuff like that, you're gonna hate it. You know, you're not gonna like it. So the story is... it's hard to describe without sort of laughing at it, because it is a pretty silly story. I'm not sure if it's based on a book or what. I should have looked that up before I did this, but it sounds like it's based on a book, like a series of adventure books or something, because it literally starts off... I start laughing at the opening, because it starts off with him saying, Mars is actually populated. Yes, yes indeed, and there is a tribe known as the Kobakaboo, and they live in the city Helium. There's a city called Helium. Really? Couldn't you think of a better name? Every time they say, we must get to Helium, it's like, you couldn't call it, it's a fantasy thing, call it something else. That's way too silly. Okay, but there's all these... In the opening and a lot of parts in the movie, they're throwing a little bit too much at you too fast. It's sort of like trying to tell this Lord of the Rings story in a couple minutes, which I guess Lord of the Rings tried to do also, but somehow that worked a little better. And even then, I think in the first film, I think they just barely got away with it. But it's just a lot of names you haven't heard of and a lot of information being thrown at you. And, and the ancient tribe of the bald Mr. Cleans come down, and they have the ancient weapon of the blue thingy, and the guy who may be a bad guy, we don't know yet. They give him the ultimate power, and the guy smiles, and the world will change forever. And it's one of those things where it's like, they got the right idea, they're just throwing a little bit too much. And then the film starts again with this guy who's looking for this medallion, and then he dies, and it's handed down to the son. Okay, so the movie's starting again. And then the son is reading the diary of this guy, and the movie is told through that diary. Okay, so it's starting again. And then you see this guy is, he's in Virginia, and he's transported to Mars. Okay, the story started again. It starts like 5 times, which is really odd. And that's kind of the problem. Like I said, there's a few too many. This needed one more rewrite, in my opinion. And I think whatever it was based on, it was probably trying to really grab that and really try to stick to it, because, the people out there, they're like, you can't change Harry Potter, not one word. Those kind of people would have a heart attack. Same people that go nuts about if you change something in a comic book movie or something. So they're probably trying to please that crowd while also making a good movie. And maybe in the book it works, or in the original story, but if it is, I really should do research. I apologize. But just as a movie, they're throwing a lot at you. But then it comes down to sort of those very basic plot lines as well, where it's like the guy befriends the native Martians, and there's a big bad guy coming in to take over the planet and wants to marry the beautiful princess, but she runs away because she doesn't want to be forced to marry, and of course she comes across the incredibly good-looking hero, and they're gonna form a romance over, 3 days? Did I mention this was Disney? So it's odd because at times you have this really sort of fascinating story, like the character can actually, it takes him a while to get used to how to walk because his molecular structure on this planet, I forget what the reason is why they can breathe, but is different, so gravity's a little lighter for him, so he can actually leap really far. He has to be very careful when he walks. That kind of stuff is fun. On top of that, the people, the Martians, or these 4-armed people he comes across, these green creatures, which look pretty good. They sort of look like Davy Jones in that you can tell they're CG, but you know what? It almost looks like they're there. It's actually, they put a lot of effort into it, and you kind of buy it. Anything with those people was great, because they create this culture, they create these really likable characters, and you really want to get to know them more, and you're really sort of siding with them and stuff like that. And the design of them is great too. It's just this great design. They have these horns that come down the side, and they have these 4 arms that it looks like, you know, it's not like they use 2 arms and the other 2 arms are dead. It's like they really do use all 4. And that stuff's all wonderful, and I really got into that stuff. And then at times when they would get into the more complicated stuff, like the history of Mars, or who said, like, these bald creatures who are like trying to control the universe or whatever, like, some of their dialogue is kind of fascinating and stuff. You know, some of it almost sort of leans towards that, wow, this is like kind of good sci-fi, you know, almost sort of like Dune or something like that. Like, these are very interesting, well thought out stories and characters and stuff. But then they either throw too much of that at you, too much information, or it goes down to a story that's way too basic, way too much of a formula. Like I said, you know, the princess being forced to marry, and the hero, you know, befriending the natives, and of course he's gonna, you know, like, they don't get along at first, but he's gonna befriend them, or befriending the 1 or 2 people in that tribe, you know, and stuff like that. But then there's other stuff, like they have this dog that's really creative. I love the design of this thing, and it's really cute, and it has this cool thing where it can run really fast. And that makes for a lot of good action scenes. Actually, the action scenes are a lot of fun in this movie, too. But, again, it's sort of a mishmash, because, like, the best action scene in the movie, there's a scene where he's staying behind. He's sending, you know, the princess and whoever off, and he's going to stay behind and fight the green people. And it's this really cool action scene, but it's being played, like, with this emotional backstory with his wife and child and stuff, and it's like, no, come on, give us the cool action music, give us the, all that stuff. So it's definitely sort of this mishmash mess. You know, I'm not going to say it's not, and, you know, as storytelling goes and characters and stuff like that, is this good? You know, in terms of the patterns we see, and you know, we want to evolve with story and character? Probably not. But it reminds me very much of those old Disney films that I kind of like. I don't love, but I like them okay. You know, sort of like that Three Musketeers Disney movie, or The Rocketeer, or something like that. There's sort of these, when you get down to it, there are these very basic adventure stories. And you can follow it enough. It does get complicated, but you can just catch on to what they're talking about, and you can get the essential story, because this is a story we've seen a million times again. So I'm very, very split on it. I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I saw it on the big screen. I did see it in 3D. 3D's okay. Actually, a lot of good 3D movies, good-looking 3D movies come out. The Avengers in 3D actually looked pretty good and stuff. The 3D, I think, is getting a little better. The 3D in this one's just okay, though. It's not bad, it's just okay. So, like I said, I think for this kind of film, the people that would like it, if you're really looking for sort of a simple but creative adventure story that you're just sort of looking to be somewhat invested, but you're not really going to question it that much. You're just sort of going to see some fun action and some creativity. You'll like it fine. If you're looking for, like, a really good film, something that's going to challenge you and, you know, really make you think and say, wow, this movie's doing new things, it's not doing much. The only new stuff, I would say, a lot of the designs are pretty neat and kind of new, and like I said, I think the stuff with the green people is kind of cool. So we've sort of seen it before, but I really like these characters. I like what they do with these characters. So there's some new ideas, but in terms of, like, the story, what it comes down to, you've seen it a million times, and there's a lot of stuff you can point out that either doesn't make sense or isn't explained well. So for me, I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I went to see it, even though I'll acknowledge, you know, it doesn't fully work. But yeah, I think you can sort of get a general idea about it. Like I said, if you saw Stargate or Tron Legacy or, like, some of the old Disney adventure films like Three Musketeers or Rocketeer or something like that, it's along those lines. It doesn't make much sense, you know, but it has sort of the very basic action-adventure stuff. If you're done with that stuff, you want to see something new, you really want to be challenged, you're not going to find it here. There's way too much to complain about. So hopefully that gives you an idea what kind of film this is and whether or not you want to go see it. So that's about it, and I'll talk to you later.